I can still hear her voice echoing in my ears, sharp, trembling, almost rehearsed. "Don't come to my wedding, Mom. It's embarrassing for me." And yet, there I was, sitting quietly in the very hall I had paid for, Kane resting by my side, watching as my only daughter stood in her white gown, horrified to see me there. Guests turned, whispers rising like a storm, their eyes darting between her and me, between the bride and the mother she wished to erase. It was supposed to be her happiest day. Instead, it became the day she exposed who she had truly become. But before I tell you what happened next, if you're listening to this right now, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Because this story is not just mine. It belongs to every parent who has ever sacrificed everything, only to be told they were not enough. Let me take you back. Let me show you how a perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning turned into the moment my daughter tried to erase me from her life. It began with a knock on my apartment door. I was 71 then, moving slower than I once did, my Kane always near. My husband long buried. The small apartment was quiet, almost too quiet, until Emily, my Emily, arrived that morning, her smile wide, her arms full of wedding catalogs and color swatches. She kissed my cheek, sat at my worn kitchen table, and spilled dreams across it like confetti. "Mom, we need to finalize the florist. The venue wants the last payment this week. And the dress alterations, they doubled their price, but it'll be worth it. It has to be perfect." Her voice carried excitement, urgency, and beneath it, something else. A calculation I didn't yet understand. I brewed tea while she spoke, my hands trembling not from doubt, but from arthritis that had grown worse in the winter. And I listened, as I always did. Because when you raise a child alone, when you've worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table, you learn to listen, to give, to sacrifice without question. And so, as she talked, I reached for my checkbook. The money had been meant for my future, doctor's bills, medicine, the quiet years of old age when no one else would be there. But I didn't hesitate. I wrote check after check, watching my savings shrink as Emily's wedding dreams grew larger, the chandeliers, the string quartet, the cake with silver roses. Every piece of it, paid for by my hands, by my years of labor. And yet, there was something strange that day. Her fiancé, Matthew, stood in the doorway of my small apartment, silent, arms crossed, his eyes never leaving the pen as it scraped across each check. He didn't thank me. He didn't even smile. And when our eyes met, there was a glimmer there, cold, sharp, unsettling. I pushed it aside. I told myself I was imagining it. After all, love makes us blind, and a mother's love blinds most. Of all the weeks passed, and the demands grew heavier. A deposit here. A last-minute charge there. Emily's voice grew more insistent, her eyes more desperate. And still, I gave. I gave until my account was nearly empty. Until the security I had saved for myself was gone. I told myself it was worth it. That when the day came, I would sit proudly in that hall, watching my daughter walk down the aisle, knowing I had made it all possible. But I was wrong. Because one phone call changed everything. It was a Thursday evening when the phone rang. Emily's name lit up the screen, and I answered with a smile. But her tone was flat, strained, cold. "Mom, about the wedding?" "Yes, darling?" I said, already bracing for another bill. "You shouldn't come." I laughed softly, certain I'd misheard. "What do you mean, I shouldn't come?" There was silence, then the words that broke me. "It's embarrassing for me. You walk with a cane. You look old." I don't want people whispering. It'll ruin the pictures. My hands froze. My breath caught. Her words cut deeper than any knife ever could. I sat there, clutching the phone, listening to the child I had given everything, erase me with a single sentence. And when I hung up, I realized something. I wasn't just being uninvited. I was being erased. That night, I cried until my pillow was soaked. But by morning, something inside me had hardened. If my daughter wanted me erased from her perfect little story, then I would return not as the embarrassment she imagined, but as the truth she had tried so hard to bury. Because what she didn't know, what Matthew didn't know, was that I had already begun to notice the cracks, the secrets, the lies. And by the time their wedding day arrived, I would be ready. As I folded the last of my bank statements and placed them in a drawer, I realized, this wasn't just about being unwanted at a wedding. This was about something far darker. Something Matthew didn't want me to see. And I was about to find out exactly what it was. After that phone call, I sat in the silence of my little apartment for what felt like hours. The clock ticked. The tea in my cup went cold. But my mind would not rest. How could my own daughter, my Emily, say such words? After everything I had done. After every sacrifice. After every check I had signed. But the more I thought about it, the more something gnawed at me. This wasn't just about appearances. This wasn't just about me walking with a cane, or looking older in photographs. No. There was something rehearsed in her tone. Something as if those words didn't entirely belong to her, and that's when it struck me. Matthew, the way he had been watching me every time I paid. The cold flicker in his eyes. The faint smirk when Emily looked away. I had ignored it, dismissed it as nerves or coincidence. But now, replaying it in my mind, I saw it for what it was. Calculation. This wasn't just Emily's cruelty. This was Matthew's influence. The very next morning, I decided to take a walk, not to clear my head, but to gather courage. My cane tapped against the pavement as I made my way to the small bakery near the marina, the one where gossip flowed as freely as coffee. People there always talked, and I needed to hear what they knew. It didn't take long. The moment I mentioned Matthew's name, the baker's wife froze, her eyes darting away. A man at the counter muttered something under his breath. And when I pressed, gently but firmly, the truth began to slip through the cracks. Matthew had a history. A trail, faint but undeniable. 2 engagements before Emily. Both broken abruptly. Both women left in debt, their families whispering of money that disappeared, of promises that evaporated, and then there was his job. Or rather, the illusion of one. The so-called consulting firm he boasted about had no office, no staff, no clients anyone could name. A business in name only. A facade. Piece by piece, the man my daughter was about to marry was beginning to unravel before me. That evening, I pulled out my old wooden box, the one where I kept important papers, letters from my husband, and the bank records I had guarded for years. I opened my checkbook. Line after line, I saw the evidence of my sacrifice. Thousands gone. Every cent for that wedding, and for what? For Matthew to stand tall in a suit he hadn't earned, marrying a woman who couldn't see the trap tightening around her. I clutched the box to my chest and whispered aloud, "Robert, what would you have done?" My late husband's name felt heavy in my mouth, like a prayer and a plea. The room was silent, but inside me, an answer formed. He would have fought. And so would I. But how? How does a 71-year-old woman with failing joints and a fading voice fight against a charming liar and her own blinded child? The answer came unexpectedly. A phone call, not from Emily. Not from Matthew. But from an old friend I hadn't spoken to in years, Margaret, a woman from my church circle, one who knew how to listen, how to dig, how to find answers where others saw none. "Emily's marrying Matthew?" she asked, her voice tight. "Do you know who that man really is?" And in that moment, I realized. I wasn't alone. That night, lying in bed, staring at the cracked ceiling of my little apartment, I understood something crucial. This wasn't about me being embarrassing. This was about me being inconvenient, because I was the one person who could see through Matthew. I was the one person who had asked the right questions, noticed the wrong details, followed the faint trail he had tried to cover, and if I disappeared, whether from the wedding, or from Emily's life altogether, his plan would be perfect. But I wasn't going to disappear. Not yet. The next morning, I put on my navy blue dress, tucked my papers into my purse, and walked into the first of many offices. If Matthew thought he could erase me, he was about to learn. This old woman wasn't so easy to bury. The next morning, I stood before the mirror in my small apartment, adjusting the navy blue dress my late husband once said made me look like royalty. My cane rested against the wall, my purse heavy with folded papers, bank statements, copies of checks, and the faint outline of suspicion that had now become certainty. I was not going to let this man take my daughter. Not quietly. Not without a fight, and so, cane in hand, I walked into the first of many offices. The bank was quiet that morning. Cold marble floors, sterile air, the faint scent of paper and ink. I asked to see the manager, a young man who looked at me with the polite pity reserved for the elderly. But when I placed my checkbook on his desk, pages of transfers to Emily's account, thousands upon thousands, and asked if he had ever seen deposits made by Matthew, the look in his eyes changed. He hesitated. Shifted in his chair. Then he leaned forward and lowered his voice. "Ma'am, off the record, your daughter's fiancé has been withdrawing cash in large amounts. Tens of thousands. Always within days of your deposits." My heart sank. I already knew, deep down. But hearing it aloud felt like ice in my veins. "Where does it go?" I asked. The manager shook his head. "We don't know. But he isn't building a future. He's burning through it." I left the bank with trembling hands, gripping my cane tighter than ever. My legs ached, but I pushed forward. I wasn't done yet. At the registry office, I asked to search public marriage records. The clerk looked surprised, but when I gave Matthew's full name, she sighed. 2 previous marriages. Both short. Both ended in divorce. Both sealed with financial settlements. The first wife, Linda Carter, bankrupt within a year of marrying him. The second, Isabel Green, left with debts and vanished from town, and now, Emily was next in line. I sat on a wooden bench outside the registry, papers in my lap, tears stinging my eyes. I remembered Emily as a child, her small hand in mine as she crossed the street, her laughter echoing in the garden as she chased fireflies, the way she clung to me at night after her father's funeral, whispering, "Don't leave me, Mommy." And now she was the one leaving me. Not just leaving, but casting me aside, blind to the wolf she was about to marry. I pressed the papers to my chest and whispered, "Not again. I will not lose her again." That evening, I visited Margaret, the friend who had called me days earlier. She lived in a modest home near the harbor, her kitchen always warm, smelling of cinnamon and strong coffee. She listened as I laid out the documents, the records, the whispers I had gathered. When I finished, she nodded grimly. I heard the same. My cousin works in legal filings downtown. Matthew's name has been tied to lawsuits, small claims, debt collectors, things that never quite make it to the papers but leave a trail if you know where to look. She reached across the table, her hand covering mine. "You can't stop this wedding with feelings, my dear. You need proof. Hard proof. And then, you need to decide when to reveal it." Her words struck me. Timing. That would be everything. I returned home that night exhausted, but I couldn't sleep. I sat at my small desk, the lamp flickering weakly, staring at the growing pile of evidence. Marriage records. Bank withdrawals. Whispers of lawsuits, but as I flipped through the papers, something new caught my eye. A single receipt, tucked among Emily's wedding invoices. A deposit slip, not to her account, but to Matthew's, for a staggering amount. The handwriting wasn't hers. It was his, and the date? Just one day after I had paid the venue. So this was his plan: drain me dry, marry Emily, and vanish with the money. But there was still something missing. Something I couldn't see yet. The answer came unexpectedly. A phone call, late at night, the kind that makes your heart race before you even answer. It was Margaret again, her voice urgent. "Do you know a woman named Linda Carter?" "Yes," I whispered. "Matthew's first wife. She wants to talk to you." I froze. My heart pounded. Matthew's first wife, the one who had been left ruined, wanted to speak with me. The next morning, I found myself sitting in a dim cafe, waiting for a woman I had only read about in legal documents. And when she arrived, what she told me changed everything I thought I knew about the man my daughter was about to marry. The cafe was dimly lit, tucked between a pawn shop and a laundromat. Not the kind of place I usually visited, but Margaret insisted it was discreet, safe. My cane clicked softly against the floor as I entered, scanning the room until I saw her. Linda Carter. Matthew's first wife. She was younger than me by at least 20 years, but her eyes carried decades of pain. She looked up when I approached, and for a moment, there was hesitation. Then recognition. As if she could see in me the same scars he had carved into her life. I sat across from her. The silence stretched until she finally spoke. "You're Emily's mother." "Yes," I said softly. "She's marrying Matthew." Linda flinched, her fingers tightening around the chipped coffee cup in her hands. "Then you need to listen to me very carefully." What she told me chilled me to the bone. Matthew wasn't just careless with money. He wasn't just greedy. He was deliberate. Calculated. A predator. When she married him, she had just inherited a modest fortune from her parents' estate. Within a year, the money was gone. Not stolen all at once, no. Bit by bit. Small investments, secret accounts, false promises. He made her believe it was for their future, for the business he was building, but there was no business. Only debts. Only manipulation, and when the money was gone, so was he. Divorce papers appeared on her doorstep without warning, and within weeks, he had moved on to the next. Her voice cracked as she went on. "I was lucky, in a way. I got out with just debt. Isabel, the second one, she didn't. He left her with collectors at her door, people you don't want to owe. She disappeared. No one's seen her in years." I felt my stomach twist. Isabel. The name I had seen on the records. The ghost in Matthew's trail. Linda leaned forward, her voice lowering. "Do you know why he targets women like Emily? Women with family money, with someone older who'll pay, who'll sacrifice? Because he knows he doesn't have to take it directly from them. He can take it from you." Her eyes met mine, filled with pity. "He's using your daughter as a bridge. You are the real target." The words hit me harder than Emily's cruel phone call. I had always thought it was about her. That he wanted Emily for her innocence, her naivety. But no. It was me. My savings. My years of sacrifice. My devotion to a daughter who couldn't see the wolf standing at her side. My cane trembled against the floor. My hand shook as I lifted the coffee cup. But my mind was suddenly sharper than it had been in years. I wasn't just the embarrassing mother. I was the obstacle, and obstacles. Matthew removed them. Linda reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. Inside were photocopies, emails, bank slips, fragments of evidence she had kept all these years. "Not enough to win in court," she said, "but enough to paint the picture." "Show her," Linda whispered. Before it's too late. I clutched the papers, my chest heavy. Would Emily listen? Or would she turn on me again, choosing him over the woman who raised her? The cafe suddenly felt smaller. The shadows deeper. Because if Linda was right, if Matthew knew I was beginning to see the truth, then I wasn't just unwanted. I was in danger. I walked home slowly, the envelope heavy in my purse, each step echoing like a drumbeat of fate. When I entered my apartment, I locked the door, shut the curtains, and spread the papers across my kitchen table. The evidence was damning, enough to shake anyone with sense, but Emily? My Emily, would she see it? Or would love blind her until it was too late? That night, as I tried to rest, the phone rang again. But this time, it wasn't Emily. It wasn't Margaret. It was a voice I didn't recognize. Low. Menacing. Male, you need to stop asking questions. My blood ran cold. I sat frozen, the receiver pressed to my ear, the silence on the other end suffocating, and then the line went dead. I knew then. It wasn't just about stopping me from going to the wedding. It was about silencing me forever. And if I wanted to save Emily, and myself, I had to act before the vows were spoken. The silence after that phone call was heavier than any darkness I had ever known. You need to stop asking questions. The voice had been calm, almost bored, as if my life was nothing more than an obstacle to be cleared away. But it told me everything I needed to know. Matthew knew. He knew I was digging. He knew I was close. And now, he wanted me gone, not just from the wedding, but from the world entirely. I sat there in my small apartment, my cane propped against the table, the envelope of evidence spread before me. For a moment, fear gripped me. At 71, my bones were fragile, my health uncertain. What could I possibly do against a man like him? But then I thought of Emily. My little girl, the child who once clutched my hand in the dark, begging me not to leave her. The child who had trusted me with every scraped knee, every broken heart. She was still in there, somewhere, trapped under the spell of a man who saw her as nothing more than a pawn, and I realized something powerful. If Matthew wanted me erased, then I would make myself unforgettable. The next morning, I called Margaret. My voice was steady, though my hands trembled around the receiver. I'm going to the wedding. She hesitated. Even after what Emily said? Especially after what she said. Because this isn't about photographs or appearances anymore. It's about saving her before it's too late. Margaret didn't argue. Instead, she offered what I hadn't dared ask for: help. I'll be there. In the back. Watching. If anything happens, you won't be alone. Those words gave me strength. I spent the following days preparing, not just emotionally, but carefully, strategically. I organized the documents Linda had given me, cross-checked them with bank withdrawals, added my own records of the money I had given Emily. I wrote a statement, clear, factual, undeniable, and then, I did something I never thought I'd do. I called Linda again. Her voice was weary, but when I told her my plan, she didn't hesitate. I'll stand with you. If she won't believe her mother, maybe she'll believe a stranger who once wore the same ring. Together, we prepared. Two women bound not by friendship, but by survival. By the need to protect a girl walking blindly into a trap. The night before the wedding, I barely slept. I sat in my armchair, the one my husband had bought me years ago, staring at the photographs of Emily through the years. Her first birthday. Her graduation. The father-daughter dance she never had because Robert was gone, and I had tried, in my clumsy way, to take his place. I whispered into the quiet, Robert, if you're watching, give me strength tomorrow. And in the stillness, I felt it. Not words, not a voice, but a steadiness settling into my bones. The morning of the wedding dawned bright, cruelly beautiful. The kind of day that makes people believe in love and happily ever afters. I dressed slowly, carefully. The navy blue gown again, pressed and neat. My silver hair pinned back with the comb Robert had given me on our anniversary. My cane polished, steady in my hand. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I didn't see an old woman. I saw a mother on a mission. The venue sparkled when I arrived. Chandeliers glistened, flowers lined the aisles, music floated softly through the air. Guests milled about in expensive suits and glittering dresses, and then, they saw me. Gasps. Whispers. A ripple through the crowd as I walked in, slow but steady, my cane clicking against the marble floor. Some smiled politely. Others frowned. Confused, but it was Emily's face, the horror in her eyes, that burned into me. Mom, she hissed, rushing toward me. What are you doing here? I told you not to come. Her voice shook. Anger. Panic. Fear. But not just of me. Of what my presence meant. I looked at her, my heart aching. I paid for this day, Emily. Every flower, every note of music. And you? May be ashamed of me, but I will not be erased. Before she could reply, Matthew appeared. His smile was wide, rehearsed for the guests, but when his eyes met mine, it faltered. For the first time, I saw fear in him. He knew the ceremony began. The guests hushed. The music swelled. Emily stood at the altar, her hands trembling in Matthew's, and I? I reached into my purse, fingers brushing the folder of evidence. I knew the moment was coming. The moment I would stand, speak, and shatter the illusion he had built. But as I rose, leaning on my cane, I noticed something strange. 2 men near the back, dressed in black, their eyes not on the bride or groom, but on me. Watching. Waiting. Matthew hadn't just planned to silence me socially. He had planned to silence me permanently. I felt the weight of every eye on me as I stood, my cane steady, the folder in my hands. This was it, the moment that would decide everything. And I knew. If I failed now, I would not leave this wedding alive. The air inside that hall was suffocating. The music had faded, the guests sat in silence, and I could feel every eye on me as I rose slowly from my chair. My cane tapped against the marble floor, steady, deliberate, like the beat of a drum announcing war. In my hand was the folder. Heavy, not with paper, but with truth. Excuse me, I said, my voice carrying further than I expected. Before the ceremony continues, there are things that must be said. Gasps. Whispers. Matthew stiffened at the altar, his hand tightening around Emily's. She looked at me, horrified, shaking her head. Mom, please. Don't. But it was too late. I had been silenced once. I would not be silenced again. I opened the folder, my fingers trembling only slightly, and began to read. Matthew Carter. 2 previous marriages. Both ended in financial ruin for the women he left behind. Bankruptcies. Lawsuits. Debts. I lifted my eyes to the crowd. This man is not the loving groom you think he is. He is a predator. A thief. A liar. The guests gasped, murmurs spreading like wildfire. Matthew laughed, the sound brittle, desperate. She's senile. She doesn't know what she's talking about. But then, I held up the receipts. The deposit slips. The copies of checks in his handwriting. This is my money. Every dollar I gave Emily, he withdrew. He has no business. No future. Only a trail of broken women and stolen fortunes. Emily's face drained of color. She looked at Matthew, her lips trembling. Is this true? He tried to pull her hand, to whisper in her ear, but she yanked away, and then, Linda stepped forward. Her voice rang through the hall. It's true. I was his first wife. He took everything from me. And when the money was gone, he left. The room erupted. Gasps. Shock. Someone stood to see better, another clutched their pearls. Matthew's mask shattered. For the first time, the charming smile was gone, replaced by rage. He turned on me, his eyes burning. You should have stayed away. You don't know what you've done. But I didn't flinch. I know exactly what I've done. I've saved my daughter. Security moved toward him then, called by the murmurs in the crowd. But before they could reach him, Emily, my Emily, spoke. Her voice shook, but it was strong enough to be heard. Get out, Matthew. This wedding is over. The silence that followed was heavier than thunder. Matthew's face twisted with fury, but he knew it was finished. He shoved past the guards, storming out, leaving behind the wreckage of his carefully crafted lie. The ceremony ended not with vows, but with whispers and broken illusions. The flowers wilted, the music never returned. Guests filed out, some shaking their heads, others patting my shoulder gently, whispering, "You were brave. You saved her." Emily stood alone at the altar, her dress shining under the chandelier. Tears streaming down her face, she looked at me, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. Just a choked sob, and then she fled the hall. That night, I returned to my little apartment, exhausted. My cane leaned against the chair, the folder of evidence now closed forever. I sat in silence, and for the first time in months, I felt peace, not victory. Not triumph. Just peace, because I had done what mothers do. I had protected my child, even when she didn't want protecting. Even when she had turned against me. It has been a year since that day. Emily has not married. She works now, slowly rebuilding her life, humbled by what she almost lost. We speak sometimes, though the words are cautious, fragile. There is still distance between us, but there is also a glimmer of something I had thought was gone. Respect.as for me? I no longer pour my savings into someone else's dreams. I buy flowers for myself. I sip tea slowly in the mornings, watching the sun rise without guilt. I carry my cane proudly, not as a sign of weakness, but as a reminder of every step I have survived, and I've learned something. Family is not about photographs or weddings or appearances. It's not about perfection. It's about truth. About standing when no one else will. About love that does not vanish when it becomes inconvenient. So if anyone, child, spouse, friend, ever tells you that you are an embarrassment, remember this: you are not the shame. You are the strength, and one day, they will see it.